All right, well, welcome to Life Looks Now podcast, where we would normally be talking about health, wealth, and connections, but tonight we have a very special episode where we're going to be talking about politics and policies. And I am the host, Monique Nicole, and I am here with my really good friend Stephanie. And I am so excited to have her here. We have so much to talk about. And why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself and just let the people know what you do?
Hi, Monique. Hi, nice to see you again. It's been a while, I think, since when I was in Miami, and then it had been like several years before that. Monique and I
Mm-hmm.
worked together years ago, which was my favorite thing. The worst job ever, but made some great friends.
We were in the trenches.
The trenches. Um, so, my name is Stephanie. I am a political strategist and writer. I have done a lot of work in the political sphere over the course of the last 2 decades, actually, a little bit more than that. I started when I was a teenager, actually, doing work on campaigns. And then I went to school, I studied political science. I worked on some more campaigns, and then I started writing. I was trying to build a resume for grad school eventually. So I started writing, and I ended up becoming a published writer, mostly news and political subject matter. And then after I did that, I finished my degree, and I went on to work for some more campaigns. Eventually, wrote for some larger publications, and then I went to grad school and studied strategic public relations at GW, which is like a cross between PR, communications, political science, and ethics. I would say, like if they ran at each other at 100 miles an hour, that's kind of what the degree looked like. And then from there, I was working in political consulting, and I also worked for a trade association on the federal level. And I'm also in the New Jersey Young Democrats. I'm the political director of that organization. So a lot of different pieces to my career, but as a result, I feel like I have kind of a good breadth and understanding of the political world nationally and on a state and even a municipal level. So thanks.
Right. Yeah. What's your overall goal? Like, where do you want to be as far as your career?
I've always said I wanted to work for the Department of State, and actually work on an international level, but there's so much that's always going on in this country. I feel like I'm getting distracted all the time by different issue areas that are in need of advocacy. So for me, I get pulled in a lot of different directions. But I'm sort of still feeling that out, because when you look at an issue area and you start working, or you look, not even an issue area, if you look at just an area where there is work that needs to be done in a certain realm, whether that's like the state level, you can get into the weeds in that. And then you end up finding stuff that's interesting to you and you want to do work on that. So it's really hard actually to know exactly where the career is going to take me. It's kind of what's happening in the world, like what's happening in my state, what's happening in my country, you know, um,
Right.
where can I be useful? And that's kind of what it looks like right now. So right now I'm doing consulting work, and I do some writing work as well. So yeah, I'm helping with some communications consulting too. That's outside of the political purview. So yeah, it's just kind of, it feels like being pulled in like 80 directions every day.
Yeah, it feels like it's hard to focus because sometimes when you have like a passion about something and then you see something else pop up and then it's like, oh, what's up?
I'm so bad about that. Like
Me
I've
too.
I've really, I know you have had a lot of different
Um,
careers, I feel like, since I've known you. And I actually love that about you, because you've always been really resourceful. And I'm like, oh, Monique knows the answer to this. Like, this is something I'll ask you about. Like, oh, do you know anything about like medical transcription for people in like oncology? And you're just like, oh yeah, like, I did that one time. I was like, what? It's like so random. So,
it is random. Like you texted me the other day asking me stuff about like software and tech and stuff like that. I'm like, oh yeah.
you were like union organizing at one point, and I was like, oh, like, and I think that was after we were working on our campaign, and I was,
Hmm.
oh, so what do you do? Do you want to work for the unions? And you were like, no, I'm just doing this.
I'm just doing this because I was a flight attendant, and
That's another thing. You were a flight attendant. Like, it's so
that's
funny.
hilarious.
Person that I'm like, oh, Monique knows something about like a little bit of everything, which I feel like is
Right.
me, but I feel like you are even more that way, which I really like. I love that about you. It's one of my favorite things.
I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing because I have had a hard time in life just centering myself and trying to really figure out like what do you really want to do, because it really is hard to like just focus on that one thing. But yeah, so I definitely know that it is my passion um I think motivate people and to educate people. And so that's why I started this podcast because I just feel like it's so much information out there. And a lot of times you can really just network with the people that you already know to like bring that information to like one place versus, me going out looking for someone to talk about all these different things. Like just look inside your network and then actually use those people to get the word out, about certain things. And so I just realized I had all these intelligent people around me. And so I'm like, okay, I need to talk to these people. Like this could motivate the world. So I'm
Mhm.
really hoping that, more people start watching my podcast because I've had the first episode, um I had an entrepreneur on and had her hands in everything. I mean, she was so informational. And then I had a physician assistant on and we talked about that and talked about health and all those things. So now I have you on, and it's like the hot spot right now because Trump is our president
Again,
again.
you may be wondering how we got here.
Do you know I cried? Did you
No, I didn't cry.
cry? I cried.
I don't know if I have.
I cried. I cried because I went to sleep. I didn't watch like all night, like to see who was gonna win. I was like, I'm just gonna go to sleep. And I just didn't expect to wake up and see this man.
Oh no, I'm such a control freak that like I watched until I knew. So I was watching that. I become a weirdo when it's election night. Like I
Yeah.
don't even like to go to election parties. Like I'll go to one, but I got invited to a couple, like one down in South Jersey, and I was like, I'm gonna miss so much if I go down to South Jersey because I'll be driving 2 hours each way, and like I need to be like attached to the TV and attached to my phone, and I'm on like 14 different channels, and I'm like, oh, what's 535 saying? Oh, like what's the New York Times saying? What's going on? And then I've got like
Mm-hmm.
MSNBC on, and I'm watching Steve Kornacki in the background with his khakis, like pointing to different glowing boards and like putting numbers on the screen, and I'm just like constantly texting other political strategists who are like, oh yeah, I know a little bit about this state, or I know a little bit about this, and like I don't think it's going to look like this. And so this time around invitations to a few different events, and I was like, no, I think I'm actually just going to stay home. And so I actually sat in my kitchen in front of the TV, and I was doing exactly what I just described. And I would say probably, so I had heard that Pennsylvania was in a really weird position. And I don't want to go on about this because I could actually talk about this for probably hours, but
Mm-hmm.
Pennsylvania was positioned with all of the mail-in votes that had gone in early voting to be an extremely blue state for this election. And what ended up happening was all of the same day voting, like election day votes, came through, and about 11, I want to say like 10:45 maybe at night, I could see that Pennsylvania had turned, and that Pennsylvania, that like once there was no path to Kamala Harris winning the election without Pennsylvania. And so once I saw that Pennsylvania had turned, and I was like, we're on a trajectory where like we still have so many votes to come in for same day voting that like
Mm.
win this election. And that was the point that I knew. And I was just sort of melancholy about it, and like sort of in a little bit of disbelief, I would say, like, how did this happen again? But I also knew that we made a lot of mistakes along the way. Not so much Kamala's campaign. A lot of people want to criticize her campaign. She actually ran a nearly flawless campaign, the amount of time that she had. But it was more Democrats as a whole making some mistakes. And I also think that there's just so much disinformation floating around, and so many things that normal political strategists, like just trying to win elections, haven't adapted to yet. So yeah, but I wasn't crying or anything. I was just sort of sitting there like, are we really going to do this again? Like,
Yeah.
there's nothing,
Talk about that a little bit, about some of the mistakes that you think the Democratic Party made. Because, like you said, I think that Kamala really, I mean, she went hard for that short amount of time that she had. She had the younger folks involved, invested. I mean, she was really engaged in such a short amount of time. So, what do you think the Democratic Party could have done differently to win this election?
Yeah, I know that a lot of people have given their views on this over the course of the last several months, especially in November. There were tons of people like, oh, the Harris campaign should have done X, Y, and Z. And a lot of these people are talking heads and people or maybe who do this sort of as a hobby, or, news reporters. But not a lot of people have worked in the campaign world that are on a national level, who are, who have a national level platform or an international level platform, even who can really speak about the ins and outs of campaigning, and like what a field campaign actually does. For example, like you're one of the few people I know in my circle who who does have this experience. So
Right.
the people I know in this world, I guess I'll start from the beginning. If Joe Biden were, when he won his election, there should have been a contingency plan for somebody else to run in his stead for the second term. That should have been done from the onset. Now, I understand that there's trajectory with the presidency, right? So it's like you start to achieve things, and by and large, a lot of people disagree with me because they're looking at things in like I guess in terms of like our context as a society right now, but like in terms of the way that he actually ran his presidency and the things that he accomplished a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Inflation Reduction Act was huge. The bipartisan infrastructure law was huge. The Chips and Science Act was huge. He did a lot for women. He did a lot for student loans. He did a lot for the environment. Like there are lots of different bills that were able to get passed in the legislative branch that wouldn't have happened without Joe Biden's wheeling and dealing. And one of the things he's really good at is actually getting Republicans to support what he wants. So that was something that he wasn't enough credit for. But that said, he was the oldest president at that time to ever, win the presidency. Now it's Trump again. And people were really hard on him for his age. And I think because of that, there should have been a contingency plan in place to have somebody else run in his stead, whether that was Kamala Harris or somebody else. But I don't think it should have been Kamala Harris. And when they forced Joe Biden to, sort of the party ousted him
Right.
for re-election, I disagreed with that entirely. I actually think at that point, Joe Biden should have just stayed in the election. And I'm one of the few people whom I've heard actually express that viewpoint. But what happens when you introduce a new candidate, so Joe Biden was somebody with whom we were all familiar at that point. He had been, for 2.5, 3 years. He was somebody who had been in the public eye for a really long time. Pretty much any criticisms of Joe Biden, and there were actually very few, had already come out. They were, the Hunter Biden stuff that, was by and large nonsense, but, just politically motivated nonsense. A lot of that stuff was already identified. So they didn't really have anything in terms of new material to try and indict him or get him in trouble as a president. Like he did a dirty presidency. He made some mistakes along the way, but nothing was like, oh my gosh, like Joe Biden's gotta go. The only thing was his age. And that was so badly expanded upon. And like, if you watched, he had a really bad debate. Okay. He had a bad debate, and he actually started to do a little bit better toward the end of the debate, but people's opinions were already cemented at that point. He had been
Mm-hmm.
traveling for like 72 hours. He had been in different time zones. He was sick. He had also pressed for the debate when Trump had said, I don't want to debate you. What they should have,
Right.
okay, Trump is the one who doesn't want to do the debate. Let's not do the debate. But Joe Biden is such a stand-up type of guy. He's like, the people deserve a debate. So they did it.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody identified the fact that like this guy was not doing well when he did the debate. Like he
Right.
in good shape. So they should have pushed it to another day if they were going to do it at all. And they didn't. So he ended up having a really bad debate performance. But I kept a close eye on Mr. Biden after that. And he gave like amazing, amazing off script, like no, no teleprompters or anything, speeches about like foreign policy to reporters for like an hour at a time. He gave a master class actually on foreign policy to a bunch of reporters. And this was like 2 days after the debate. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
reported. They reported on the
Yeah.
fact that I think he said Vice President Pence or Vice President Putin or something like that. He said something.
Yeah.
It was something ridiculous, and that was the only thing that got any media coverage because he just made a mistake, as we all do when we speak. Nobody is, impervious to that, and they didn't cover any of his performances at any of these different events where he actually looked great. So it was really, I think, just a campaign to oust him from office. But I will say, when he did finally decide to step down, there could not have been an open convention. Like it had to be Kamala Harris, or else it would have been actual chaos. But at that
Yeah.
point, to the point I was trying to make earlier, I know I'm carrying on a bit right now, but to that point, when Kamala Harris had, decided to run in his stead, what should have happened was she she should have really just kind of been in that place either from the onset, and there should have been more preparation for her to do this, or it shouldn't have happened at all, I think. Because what does happen is that people who are new to a race, who've never run for president before, really, and she had in a primary, but I mean, it was the Democratic primary, and like the whole country
Right.
to that, new things get introduced, new like pieces of what can we find out about this person in terms of like opposition research. These things get introduced, and they're all kind of a mystery up until that point. You don't know what's going to come out of the woodwork about a person. Not that she had anything wrong with her background, but
Mm-hmm.
like what people are going to try to find. You know that we don't operate in honesty here in this country, especially on the Republican side. So like you we will just find things about people, and it's unhealthy
Right.
to sort of start somebody running for office with so little time to actually combat that stuff. I guess there are some pros to that as well. There's less time to introduce that stuff too, but like there's not a lot of time to combat like the fact that people have a problem with women as a whole. People have a problem with
Yeah.
color as a whole. Those are new factors that you're introducing to a race. People have a problem with the police, and the fact that she was a prosecutor and
Mm-hmm.
pro police was a problem for a lot of people on the left.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different factors that were introduced that like the Democrats really didn't have any way to combat at that point, because it was like these were just new factors introduced to the whole conversation.
Yeah.
So my point in all of this rambling is that is that she didn't really make any major mistakes. I think she had like one gaffe toward the end where she said she wouldn't have changed anything on The View, and people were like, "Oh, like that's terrible. How could you not want to change anything about this terrible Biden presidency?" But she was looking at the big picture, and if historians are going to say that Biden had a good presidency, like he did, he objectively did. So that's what she was looking at. I think it came across as a sort of maybe callous toward people who are, facing like higher prices at the grocery store and stuff. And I think that's what was on. But that was really like her biggest gaffe, I think, running for office. So it wasn't really a matter of Kamala Harris being any, bad campaigner or a bad candidate. It was more like the country not really being ready for her, and
Yeah. Yeah.
party
You
not prepped.
know, I think too. I think the Democratic Party really needs to change their strategy and how they approach campaigns, because Republicans are just Their campaign style is just very dirty. It's very below the belt. And unfortunately, you cannot always take the high road. Like sometimes you're going to have to like take the low road and like, okay, if you go low, I'm gonna go to hell. Because and they kind of started to do that towards like the end, right? Like we started seeing it like they were just like, oh, they're just very weird. And they started the weird thing. Um, and they started saying other little catchphrases or whatever to kind of like dirty up their campaign a little bit. But they need to really take those gloves off and really, because Donald Trump he's not the type of person to fight fair. I mean, he won precisely by lying. He lied the whole campaign, but he has a technique about the way he lies that really makes it sound so like matter of fact, like very truthful. And if you're not the type of person who is going to hold on, let me see, let me research what he just let me, does that make sense? If you're not that type of person, you would just take what he said and just think that he's being like whatever he's saying is accurate information because he has a way of saying it that is just very casual. It doesn't seem like he's telling a lie. It doesn't seem like there's exaggerated lies. He just talks. He just talks and he lies. And if you're not the type of person that's really like, hold on, like, let me just research that, you'll just take it as face value. And he did that the entire campaign. He would lie and lie and lie, and people would just say, "That's true. It's true what he's saying." And I'm just like, "No, it's not." And they would catch him, after the debates and say, "Well, he lied about this, he lied about that, he lied about this, he lied about that." But the way he says it, the way it comes across is like he's just being very honest and he knows the truth. And his followers believe everything that comes out of his mouth.
Yeah.
Versus the other side, everyone wants to nitpick everything that Kamala's saying. Oh no, what she's saying not true. Let me look that up. Like, so it is very strange. And if the Democratic Party doesn't start really like playing dirty, um, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know if the Democratic Party just has like some old people there. Like, do they need some young people to like really?
No, it's, you know what, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have been playing on two different planes. Like they're like the Democrats are like here and the Republicans are here, and they don't operate the same way at all. And so the tactics and messaging and all of these things like work for one side and don't work for another side. Certain things are more effective in certain places. I mean, in certain ways, Democrats have an advantage in that anybody who is an educator or a person of knowledge or thoughtfulness, even without like a formal education, knows that the Democrats and the Democratic Party are more trustworthy. And I'm not saying the Democrats never lie, because that would be untrue to say.
Right.
um, but I'm saying in terms of, it's not the entire way that they operate as a whole. They try to operate with some semblance of honor, some semblance of law. And I mean, I even heard people on our side saying when Biden made his pardons that like they don't agree with it. Several of my friends were like, Biden shouldn't be doing that. And I'm like, you are the same people who said to me that you think we need to be playing dirty like 5 minutes ago, and now you're telling me that you don't like the fact that Biden pardoned people who were going to be political retribution points, like pawns in this game that Trump has. But the interesting thing about what you just said is, and I noticed this, if you look at Trump's tweets or his communications with the public as a whole, he does something that's really interesting that I've never heard any president do before. And I think it's super effective. He conflates the American people with himself. And he'll say something like he'll be talking about how there has been an attack on some place, and he's like, it's an attack on us. It's an attack on me, on us. It's not just an attack on him. It's not just an attack on those people. It's an attack on us. So people, I think, identify with that and say like he's fighting for us. And it's like subtle language like that. I don't even think he knows that he's doing it. I think he's just so effective at that. Like, but watch his language when you hear him speak, and when you watch his tweets online or anything that he writes on. Like, I don't look at Truth Social, but like if I happen upon a post from Truth Social, he always does this thing, and you're not going to see. Look at Joe Biden's social media. Look at the archives from his social media. You're never going to see. You'll see stuff about like the American people. You'll see the language say like we need to do this for the American people, but it almost sounds like detached, because it is in fact detached. He's an advocate for the American people, whereas Donald Trump says, I am the American people. The American people are me, and my issues are directly the American people's issues. And that is something that he did in his first campaign too. And I think that it drew a lot of people in, even though what he was saying was absolute nonsense. It's still.
I have a unique perspective about that, and I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, but when I see him write those things, I think it's so strategic because he wants the public to think he's talking about us as a whole, right? But really, he's talking about his constituents, his wealthy friends. Like he's talking about the people that's in his circle, on his level. So like when he says like the IRS, I'm gonna get rid of the IRS because then they're not gonna come after us anymore. You're not gonna have anybody coming after you. Why would the IRS come after you unless you're doing something fraudulent or you're just not paying your taxes? So it's not like the IRS is just picking some random person out of the crowd and saying, or off the list and saying, yeah, let's just harass this person and go after them, right? But so when he's saying these things, he has a way, it's kind of like twofold. So it's like one, it sounds like he's talking to us and he's including us, right? But really what he's saying to Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg is basically saying like, I'm going to make sure that we don't have to pay taxes. I'm going to make sure that that this benefits us. And so it's kind of like code language that he's saying. And so it kind of hits both sides, right? So I'm really talking about myself and trying to benefit myself, but I'm going to say us. So the American people really think I'm talking about them too. But at the end of the day, I'm not talking about you.
I don't think that he thinks about it that much, though. I think that that's just naturally how he operates. I think that
Right.
that's who he is as a person. I mean, he's been doing it since he's been, a prominent business person in the 1980s. Like he, was redlining back then. He was doing crazy stuff. So it's like I think he just naturally operates almost like in an us versus them mentality, and like us is his constituents, us is his people, his friends, his colleagues, his whatever. But
Mm.
conflated and I guess misappropriated unintentionally by Americans as like he's speaking on our behalf when he's
Right.
not. He's not.
Right. He has nothing in common with us. Like absolutely nothing. Even
Yeah.
I mean, I can even understand if he was like if he started out like this struggling child and grew up struggling. Like he literally can't even he doesn't even have that story. So it's like we have nothing in common with this man. So when he's saying us, it's like when have you ever been able to relate to us? Never. Like never.
I mean, yeah, it's just really it's crazy to look at and crazy to see how so many people have bought into it. Another thing that's really frustrating for me is seeing so many people in Gen Z who just became politically active and or maybe voted for the first time in this election, and so many people, because they were so young and because civics education is so rare in our country now, it's like they have no idea what's going on. And so many people bought into his nonsense because they were like, well, you see like a lot of young men who buy into Trump's nonsense. And that's what I was getting at with the Biden argument before. I think some of those guys probably would have voted for Biden as opposed to Trump, but they didn't want to vote for a woman. And because there's a lot of this like weird like Andrew Tate like kind of stuff out there that's like oh, well, men need to be alphas and men need to do this and that. And like, women can't be empowered because it's not, it's not feminine for a woman to be in power, and all of this crazy like nonsense that people are promoting from their mom's basement. And like people are just buying it and listening to it and like, oh, well, then I can't have a woman president. We're not ready for that. Some guy said to my mom, he was like a 17 or 18-year-old working in a store, and my mother went to go, I don't know, it was like a hardware store or something, and she was wearing I don't know, she wears a lot of political clothing, and like I don't know why. And I guess he asked her about her shirt, I don't remember what it said, and they got into a conversation, and he was like, well, we're not ready for a woman president. This kid's like 17 or 18 years old saying we're not ready for a woman president. And she goes, well, do you think we'll ever be? And he said, I don't know, maybe when I'm like 40 or 50. Like, where did you get this arbitrary view from, child? Like, what is this? It's all just stuff that they listen to on the internet. It's all disinformation and, the opinions of supremacists. And
Right.
that's a big problem, is like people can't discern between intelligent thinkers and speakers and, people who work in a field and have like years of experience, and like some random person with an opinion on the internet. It's like just really, really discouraging to see.
Yeah. Weird. Yeah, I can't even imagine a little kid talking this kind of stuff. Like, what are you even talking about?
Yeah.
I want to test my mic really quick. So, someone was telling me I'm getting some feedback.
It sounds a little bit muffled.
I sound muffled.
A little bit.
Someone said they hear feedback. Hold on 1 second.
You okay in there?
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Can you talk?
Can you hear me? I mean, I can still hear you. And I understood what you were saying before. It was just slightly muffled. So they're talking about, I have Joy Reid on in the background, and they're talking about the nearly 1,000 arrested Sunday in Trump's immigration crackdown. And I know that they have Ross Barack on, who's the mayor of Newark, and there was a pretty well-known raid at this point that happened in Newark by ICE, and I think like 3 people were taken from a restaurant, and one of them was an American citizen, a veteran. So we're starting to see this already. We're 1 week, and we saw it before the week was even up, Trump's first week. So it's pretty discouraging. I work in a restaurant, so I help out at my friend's father's restaurant, and it's pretty discouraging to see.
Okay. Do I sound better now?
You sound good to me.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, friends who told me that I sound muffled. Okay. So let's just talk about some of the interesting things right now we're seeing all over the internet, I guess starting with the government hiring freeze and the DEI stuff. Like, I'm just confused. I'm confused.
It's um it's a lot. It's a lot in the first week, and I think that a lot of it is stuff that's been, I mean, some of it's some of the Project 2025 stuff that we all said was going to happen, and now it's like, oh well, we're never going to get our I told you so moment, but it is right there in plain writing for people to see. But it's frustrating as a person like myself who, I'm looking to work with or in the federal government, and then to see that people are being hired and fired for purely political reasons. And DEI programs are so important. I think anybody also, just like speaking like really to somebody who understands this stuff like yourself so well, people know that DEI programs are not always perfect. They don't always operate perfectly, but that does not mean that they shouldn't exist. And I think too, now they have employees ousting other employees who are DEI hires. So they, get put on paid leave, and then with the aspiration to eventually let them go, I think is just such a toxic way to be. It actually reminds me of what they were doing in Texas with the abortion bans, and people telling their neighbors to rat out people who are providing abortions, or taking people to their abortion clinic appointments and things like that. Like, encouraging your neighbors to rat people out is just like such a nasty practice. It's just terrible.
Right. And it's so difficult to get those government jobs. Like they put you through a lot. Sometimes like 6 months before you actually start to work. Like you may have a job, but it's a 6-month process before you can actually start. And for you to hire someone and then rescind your it's mind boggling to me, because now he's saying even with the IRS, it was 88,000 people hired for the IRS that is no longer going to be hired. That scares me because obviously it's tax season. People are expecting their refunds, right? And we know how slow the IRS was like the last few years. They were very behind because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very curious how this is going to play out, especially dealing with the IRS and not having enough staff because that's insane.
Yeah, and it's not just the IRS. I mean, it's federal agencies too. So they put something that was really frustrating to me. Also, I keep just talking about how everything's frustrating to me because I feel like this entire week has been a conglomeration of frustrating events. So that's just my general like feeling is one of frustration. But they did a hiring freeze for federal agencies. So just I don't know if you know this, but the executive branch, like all of the federal agencies, fall within the purview of the executive branch. They're considered agencies of the executive branch. So these aren't hiring freezes for the legislative branch. So like they're still hiring staffers for Congress, and the hiring positions in the judicial and legislative branches, but just not the executive.
Mhm.
So they are willing to waive that freeze for certain positions, I guess, that are deemed important. And I'm sure that's on,
Based on merit.
yeah. So based on merit, cough, cough. So they're doing this now, and then they're also planning to lay people off who are DEI hires, but they're putting them on a paid leave for the time being, encouraging employees to oust people. And they're also making all federal employees work in person now. So they got rid of any remote policies and any hybrid work policies. So I don't really like, they need to have people under their thumb that badly? Like, if the work is getting done, that's something I don't understand. And I heard that the mayor of DC, Mayor Bowser, was also advocating for that because there are so many unused office buildings in DC. But I'm like, I don't know, make affordable housing out of them. Like, what are you doing? Like, I don't understand why everybody needs to be in the office if it's not necessary for people to be in the office. Like, I
Mhm.
understand I understand how an office is useful and how the synergy of people working together is beneficial at times, but does it need to be every day for every project, for every shift? Like, I think that's unreasonable.
I've seen videos of Elon Musk talking about how he basically cannot stand the fact that people are allowed to work from home, and he feels like everyone should have to work in the office. And I would not be surprised if he is the one who pretty much kind of pushed that agenda, because all of a sudden it's a crime to work from home. Like, we were doing that all through COVID, everything was fine. So why why now do we need to come back into the office?
It's very irritating as a person who has worked. Right now I'm working an in-person job and a remote job, and I've worked hybrid jobs in the past. I've worked fully remote jobs, I've worked fully in-person jobs. Certain jobs require a person to be there in person. You know, jobs, labor, physical labor is required. You need to be in person. I understand that. And those jobs aren't going anywhere, at least right now. I mean, unless AI takes them over, those jobs are still necessary. But if you can be a more effective employee working on a hybrid schedule or working remotely, why would you not want that? Like, when I was working remotely, I would work sometimes, actually not sometimes, very often, I would work random hours, like in the middle of the night, like around the clock. Not that I encourage that. I think that's a terrible practice, but that's what I used to do because I was so, motivated to do my work, and it would be really easy to just get back on the computer and start working on a project, maybe a writing project, or something policy related where I'm not getting interruptions by phone calls and teams meetings and things like that. Why would you not want that? I think that's more effective, but it's sort of the it just looks more and more, and I know everybody's like, oh, it's so alarmist, but it's looking more and more like a fascist state. That's what this is resembling.
Yes, it is. It's starting to feel like they are trying to use social media to control the perception, um, just everything. Just feels like we're leaning towards being controlled, like what you want us to see, what you want us to know. It's really cringy right now. I'm a little nervous because it's subtly happening, but it's obvious that it's happening.
Hmm.
Someone on TikTok said that they tried to post a video about, no, it wasn't TikTok. It was one of my Facebook friends, sorry, said that they were trying to post a video about um, something to do with politics, taxes and different things like that. And Facebook made her wait about 6 hours before she could post the video. And I didn't go back to find out if she was finally able to post it, but they were reviewing it before she. When has Facebook ever done that?
Yeah.
So they are watching the things that we say on social media. They are monitoring us, and they're trying to censor what we say. It
Hmm.
is I don't know. I don't understand why people are like not nervous and like because the people that voted for him are just okay. There's those two people, like okay, so there's the people that voted for him that I feel like they just blindly voted for him, and then there's those people that they know exactly what's going on and they see what's going on and they're like, right. And then you have those people who are pretty much brainwashed and they're like in a cult and they would do anything for this man. Like if he said to jump off a bridge, they would do it. So it's that. But um DEI programs, I was looking it up. It covers so many things because people think it's just about race and people think it's just about gender, but it covers so many different things like healthcare, um, educational resources. Um, it addresses like disparities in certain communities. So this is a big deal that this is being cut, and we're seeing like pretty much every company across the board backing out and basically saying, "Ha ha, you thought we cared about you, but we don't." Like Target,
Yeah.
you know, and it's just an interesting place to be right now.
Well, you see a lot of companies capitulate to the new president when a new administration comes in. That happens every term. But you kind of get to see, when I was working in political consulting, I got to see the companies that really had a backbone, that were willing to stand up for certain things. Like obviously Costco is a big one, willing to stand up for the DEI programs it has implemented for its people, and I respect that a lot. Um, and you get to see it from, on the consulting side, when you're working with these companies, at times you get to see how they operate and the decision making processes, and I think that that's really some good perspective. But you will see a lot of companies do this, sort of, bend the knee to the president because they think that they're going to get some benefits if the president, thinks that they're on his side. And yeah, it's disappointing though. It's disappointing all the same to see this. And also, not for nothing, DEI programs. I was reading a study the other day. The group of people who've benefited most from DEI programs are white women.
Right, I heard about that.
Like, like, oh well, they're hiring all of these people based on their race. Okay, it's more than that. It's not just that. And it's like, it's
Hmm.
like you're saying, it helps a lot of people, and it really helps all people. And nobody's saying they don't want to hire white men anymore. Like, with the existence of DEI programs, like, people still hire white men. It's not like they're not getting jobs or something. It's like, the perspective is just mind-boggling.
The least qualified white man.
Least
Like you shouldn't even be here.
over the course of my life, and having, I don't know, 20 some odd years of work experience. Actually, I've been working since I was a kid. Is that weird? Is that like child labor? Or is that like
Yes.
I was like babysitting when I was 11. Nobody lets 11-year-olds babysit anymore. Like, that's not a thing now. It's like so weird. I was babysitting other people's kids when I was 11. Isn't that strange?
No, that's called you're gonna get CPS called on you.
Like, it doesn't happen anymore. But anyway, with like my 20s plus years of relevant work experience, I tend to find that a lot of the people on the top, like the top echelons, the upper echelons of any business, and I'm not saying any corporation I've ever worked with or any organization I've ever worked for, but they tend to be like the least intelligent, the least qualified. They usually have just lots of work experience of years of being at different companies, and it's like, okay, well, eventually you made your way. But a lot of the people I know who I find are the most capable are the people who are doing the dirty work. They know the ins and outs of everything, and that goes from like middle management down. And I don't think we talk about that enough. Like, there are so many really unqualified people leading organizations, and I can say
No, it is.
it
So
from the
when he says that he's going to like, oh, everything's gonna be on a fair playing field and it's gonna be all about merit, that's what I hear is that if I like you and we're buddies or your brother went to my college and he wants you to get hired at this company, then you're in. And that's why we need to do away with these DEIs because we want the people that we want. So that's what I hear.
I've never liked I'm starting to like networking because I'm starting to view networking as something that can be authentic. But I never liked networking when I was kind of rising up in the world from college and stuff. I always thought that networking was really disingenuous, that people were, we'll network with you if you can give us something, like if you're going to prove useful to me in some way. And that's not how I operate as a person. I don't believe in that. I believe in forming real connections with people. And like, if you don't form a connection with somebody, maybe that's just not your person. But like, you form connections with people and you keep those connections because they mean something to you in terms of like, I like you as a person.
Mm.
Nice to know people who are in places, I guess, that could help you, but like, I don't feel comfortable just forming a connection with somebody for that purpose, like to that end. It just feels so, I don't know, it feels like using somebody. And like, I was raised not to use people. So I don't
Yeah.
like, and I feel like we're looking at an administration that is like, what can you do for me? And I will give you power. It's like Jared Kushner's father is now going to be the ambassador to France. It's like, what? Well, he really wanted it, Trump said. He really wanted it. What? How does that make you qualified? You don't even speak French. I probably speak more French than Jared Kushner's father. And it's like, it's just insane, you
It
know?
is insane. It is insane. And it's scary because he literally just started pulling people out of his behind. Oh, you're gonna get a job. You're gonna get a job. You're gonna get a job. It's like, huh?
Pete Hegseth, another one. Like, you were a Fox News host. You have some military experience, which is not required to be the Secretary of Defense, by the way. Has managed, I think, small organizations, has records of financial mismanagement at said organizations. He is an abuser of his multiple spouses. He has cheated. He has lied. He has a bad reputation. There are letters that came out, one from his mother writing him a letter saying, like, you're an abuser of women and I need you to change. And like, I'm not going to be able to have like a relationship with you if you don't change. And then we find out he has an effective, it's not an NDA, but like effectively an NDA with his second wife, the one who allegedly he had abused the worst. And so all of this stuff comes out and they're like, she's saying that he didn't abuse her. Well, she's under legal restrictions. She can't speak about any abuse because she's signed paperwork saying that she can't speak about it. So,
Right.
oh, now he's the Secretary of Defense. It's like, just
Jesus.
absolutely insane. I mean, irrespective of all of his, marital and relationship related ills and fouls, it's like he wasn't qualified for the job. That's the main like, item here is like he wasn't qualified for the job, but he knew Donald Trump and he was somebody who would capitulate to Donald Trump. So, yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on. So,
She's like, I'm done.
because that right there, we could just talk about that all night with that stuff. But let's talk about immigration because that's like the hot spot right now.
Yeah. So,
I find it hard to believe. I don't understand this. I feel like there are a lot of people who listen, but there aren't a lot of active listeners. So I am telling you, I am going to deport everyone. But for some reason, you hear I'm only going to deport criminals just because I keep putting emphasis on criminals. But I am telling you, I'm going to deport everyone.
well, the thing that isn't really talked about is that he views anybody who's here illegally as a criminal. So we can say, I'm only going to deport criminals. I'm only going to deport criminals. Yet you're all criminals because you're here illegally. Like, it's like come on. So stupid.
Yeah,
Um, and I'm just like, just being real, it's just like really frustrating that people don't see this. It's just, it could not be more plain. It could not be more plain. And we're here having this debate with people like, oh, well, I don't really think it's going to happen. Okay, maybe it's not going to happen to everybody, but why is it okay if it happens at all? You know?
yeah, yeah. I think the problem with this is that across the board, when we see certain things happening to one demographic, you can almost bet it's going to happen to another demographic, right? So, okay, if he says, okay, well, LGBTQ plus whatever letters, we're going to take away these rights from you. Okay, and everybody that doesn't agree with the lifestyle, they go, yeah, that's what we believe in, and like we've been wanting that, right? Okay, until he gets to your demographic, right? So then now those same people are the immigrants, right? So you were happy when he took away the gay rights, but now he's on to you now. So he's on your demographic. So now you're an immigrant or someone in your family is an immigrant. And so now you're next up. And then once you get done with that, then you go to the next demographic. So it is he's just going through the motions really. And people don't see that he's going to just keep dissecting from every demographic. And so you can get all excited if you want to, like, oh yeah, I can't stand gays. Yeah, blah blah blah. Okay, cool. Maybe that's your opinion. Fine, that's cool. But wait till he gets to your demographic and he starts to discriminate against you. You're not gonna like it so much. And so people are really not seeing that and understanding that, and that's what happened with that Latino community and the immigrant community. They're seeing it like, okay, this is gonna help us in some manner, but you're also not realizing this is gonna hurt you in a big way. And here we are.
Mhm. I don't think that people know how deep Republican strategists and strategists as a whole, especially on the campaign level, and I don't mean like on the grassroots campaign level, I mean like the upper levels of a campaign, how deeply they can get into communications within specific communities. There's a book that came out. I don't remember exactly when, maybe like early 2000s ish, called Applebee's America. And the author speaks to different women, I think it's in rural Pennsylvania, at an Applebee's, and asks them why they voted the way they did. And they're Republicans. And they're saying, I think it's like post Bush administration. I think it was like Obama won, something like that. And they're saying like, well, we don't support the Democratic Party because we're the party of family values, and like we think the Democrats like are promoting these values in communities of like gay people and all the stuff that's not like a man and a woman being married. And like, I don't know, they have these conversations with people. But one of the things that I learned from that book and from other studies I did around the time of reading that book was that when Bush was running for election, Karl Rove, who was one of his senior strategists, discovered a way. They actually used this for Brexit as well, because Brexit occurred. Like they used the Bush playbook for Brexit. They would go and get information using computers and like pulling from different places on specific little like sub areas of communities. So you could have like women in like exurban Pennsylvania who drive minivans and their children play soccer. Okay, I'm going to target this community, and we want to get them with voter registration. We want to get them to come out and vote for our candidate. And they would do that for not unlikely voters. Now, this was the thing, like I said, the Republicans were doing during the Bush election. I think it was during Bush Gore. I want to say, I think it was Bush one. Um, they were like, we're going to target these little subsectors of these communities who are not unlikely voters or people who are against us and trying to change their opinion. They're going to target people who maybe are just like leaning Republican, but are not politically activated, who are not going to vote on their own. We just need to give them that push to get them to vote. And it won them the election. Like, I mean, I know it was the hanging chads in Florida and all of that too, but like that kind of technique wins elections. That's what they did, like I said, in England with Brexit, in the UK rather. And it's something that we're seeing, like this micro targeting that happens that people don't even know about. And so that's what the Trump administration also is using to target, specific groups. But now you can do it on social media. Now you can do it on people's phones. You can do it on apps, like commercials. Like it's wild, actually.
Yeah, actually, I have a perfect example of that. You're so right on with that because I've been saying that for a while. Because we're going to talk about my millions of jobs that I've had. So when I was a flight attendant, I worked for a charter company, so I didn't fly commercial. So during that time that I was a flight attendant, the Trump campaign, this was the first time they ran the election. It was with Mike Pence. Well, the Trump campaign, they chartered our plane. So I got to fly with Mike Pence for about 2 or 3 weeks as they would campaign. Well, they would go to the smallest little hillbilly town, right, across the country. Um, and they would go speak for an hour, 2 hours, however long. and then we would leave. And I would just be, we would look out the window like, are we in Idaho? Like, why are we here? And they would go to these little small cities and campaign there, and I noticed that then. And I said, this is what's going to cause him to win because he is tapping into a demographic of people that are being ignored. Like nobody is going to talk to them. Nobody is knocking on their doors. And
Mm-hmm.
he is going in person and saying, I see you. I'm going to help you. Um, these people have never had a presidential candidate come to their small little city,
Yeah,
and he was tapping into that. And what you're saying is like so true. And I just talk about why the Democratic Party is not using these strategies.
they do, but they don't use them to the same effect. I think that because Republicans developed it. So they do use these strategies. They're getting better at it, but it always seems like the Democratic Party is playing catch up or defensive. Like Republicans are always on the offensive and Democrats are always on the defensive. And when you're constantly defending yourself, the the optics begin to look like you're doing something wrong, you know, when it's actually the reverse. And we've been seeing this again. I'm not a Democratic Party apologist. I don't think that the Democrats are perfect. There are a lot of bad things that the Democratic Party has done in different forms and at different levels, but it's by and large, they don't operate without a sense of like a common uniting sense of morality, where
Mm,
Republicans do. And I've been seeing it and watching it get worse and worse for over 20 years. And the thing that's crazy to me is like, I've been the same. And I have a lot of friends who were not politically activated, if you will, like who I feel like I was always this political person since probably like my teenage years. I would say I started really paying attention after 9/11, but like I got really, really invested toward the like middle of the Bush administration, maybe when I was around like 16. And since then, I've been a really political person and I've been watching the news. And, back then we didn't have social media, it wasn't a thing. So it was like what we got on the news. And I've been sort of seeing this trajectory with like, like, let's say the Republican Party are willing to distance ourselves from the truth if it wins us an election, happen for more and more and more and more and more over the course of time. And I feel like I've just been like shouting from the rooftops trying to tell people about this. And the response I would get from people is like, oh, well, yeah, like, but I don't really know anything about that. Or like, oh, well, Steph, you're a communist, like making jokes at me and stuff when like, which I'm not, but like, things like that. It was never taken seriously. And then people got activated, people who either, didn't, well, people mostly, I would say, who didn't care, whom I know in my circles got activated. And then all of a sudden it was like, I was overreacting and like, I didn't know what I was talking about. And I'm like, I've been watching this stuff, like I've been closely paying attention and making this into my career for over 2 decades now. So it's like a little bit of a slap in the face and I get frustrated, but also it's just like I understand why this is happening because I've been watching it slowly unravel. And it's disappointing, but I do think the one silver lining here with this Trump stuff is that in some capacity it's going to affect each of us. And I think sometimes people really just need something to actually affect them personally to understand.
mm. Yeah, that makes sense. What would you do different if you were, if you were planning the next election and you were trying to pick a candidate? What type of candidate do you think that the Democratic Party should go with, and what would be your strategy?
It's hard to say right now because things are moving so rapidly. So I'm like, I'm not in the business of making predictions. Although I have found that some of my predictions have been accurate, which I'm like, but again, I don't like to like, promote those or anything. That's not, but I guess like just given the information I have right now and what I know right now, I would run somebody. I'm not saying I would run this person, but I would run somebody like a Gavin Newsom type, somebody who somebody who's quick on his or her feet, who can answer questions with succinct answers that combat disinformation. And I think somebody who is has a lot of stamina, who is younger but not too young, and who is able to really just make good succinct points. I think that that's really important because people take stuff like debates and these little clips, like the 8 second, uh, I guess, attention span that people seem to have nowadays. Like they take clips and they'll use those and they'll say like, this is why I believe in this. This is what I saw from this interview. And like that's the information that people are sharing, and like myself included, because like on Instagram I used to write a lot of like long blurbs and things like that, and I've realized that A, the algorithms downgrade those, and B, I would not really get, I was getting some interaction, but what would end up happening was I would get interaction from people who were just like looking to troll me or just disagree with me. And like I realized that attention spans are so short compared to what they once were. And I don't think attention spans were ever really long to begin with, at least in my life. So
Right.
I think we need somebody who's like quippy and quick on his or her feet and is able to just like combat disinformation and misinformation and sort of like flip the narrative. And I think somebody who can also be on the offensive as well as the defensive, but but who can create new narratives as opposed to always defending these false narratives.
Yeah. I don't really, I can't picture who would be the next Republican candidate after Trump, because Trump made such a big impact. Um, I don't know who could follow up behind him.
I don't know that any.
I think if the Democrats had somebody really strong, but kind of moderate and not too too left, just kind of moderate, I think we could win. We can win it back. We could win back our country.
That was the beauty of Joe Biden, and nobody wants to give him this. And if you can't tell, like I'm a huge Joe Biden fan, and I'm in the minority because I don't know anybody who's like I'm a huge Joe Biden fan. So like, but I am. One of the great things about somebody like Joe Biden is that he's so innocuous in so many ways. Like he's a like kind of just a like white guy walking around being nice. He's not too far in this direction. He's not too far in that direction. He'll talk to those people. He'll talk to those people.
Yeah.
And I think that, we say as a society, like we want to be really excited about a candidate. Like we want somebody who's dynamic and who's likable and who is really funny and charming and witty and all of these things. But like when you have too strong of personality traits, what ends up happening is you end up having a strong backlash from people who don't like those personality traits or those beliefs. Like that's why Bernie Sanders was never effective, because Bernie Sanders is effective in the areas he talks about, but in the reverse, you have a lot of people who are like, I disagree with everything he's saying. I would never vote for that guy. Whereas they might vote for Joe Biden. And in fact, they do vote for Joe Biden. But, because it's almost like he wasn't being a super people pleaser or anything, but he was just agreeable enough that people were like, oh, I don't love him, but I'm going to vote for him.
Right. And you want that likability to happen also amongst, the parties. You want somebody that can cross the aisle and get, you don't want someone that everyone across the aisle hates, because unfortunately white men have that advantage. It doesn't matter how much you can't stand this person, for whatever reason, they have an understanding with each other where they could put all of that aside and sit down and have a conversation from white man to white man. Like, I don't know what it is, but they just have that, like they have a mutual respect for each other. So I don't know the direction that the country's going to go, but I will pretty much realize like they don't want a woman and they don't want a black woman, and that's gonna we see that. So I'm hoping the next person is, like you said, like a younger, moderate candidate who can really just vibe with both sides. So at least we can get something done, like get our country back. Because by the time this man is done, everybody will be crying.
Honestly, people
Everybody will be crying. I mean,
not know it yet, and that's the
but
crazy.
I don't know. But I had you here long enough, so thank you for coming on and just sharing your perspective. And we're gonna be watching. We might have to do this again after some more stuff with the fan.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope that I'll see you again soon. Down and visit you. It's been too long. I can't let it go like what, 4 years or 3 years or
I
however long.
know. I'll come up there. I have to come up there because I saw a spa up there in New Jersey that I want to go to. What's it called? Soja or I don't know. I'm making it up, but I'll text it.
Spa Club. My friend went there today.
What is it?
Sojo Spa Club.
Yes,
Yeah,
I want to go there.
it's really nice. There are a lot of cool spas up here. But
When
let's
it's
get
not snowing and cold, I'll be up there.
in the summertime. It's
Yeah,
lovely.
yeah, I'll be up there. So thank you. I love you.
Love you too.
Bye.
Bye.